It's great to be back after traveling over the last month plus. And as I traveled, I thought a lot about trust. We're going to talk about trust this morning. And I thought about how much trust I had in order to be able to travel. And over the last month and a half, I got on 6 different airplanes. And every time I simply trusted that all the complex parts of that plane were going to work just right to get me up in the air and back down again. I never once stopped and asked to see the mechanic's report, the safety check, to make sure everything was okay. I just got on the plane and started watching a movie or even fell asleep. That's how much I trusted. And I never stopped by the cockpit on the way in and asked to see the pilot's flying record, to see their license and how good of a pilot they were. I just trusted that they were going to do just fine. Thought about all the kilometers that I drove while I was away, visiting different people in different places. And every time I got in the car, I was trusting that the people in the cars all around me were going to stay in their lane and drive exactly the way they were supposed to be. All that separated us going head on was a line painted in the middle of the road, and I trusted that they were going to stay on their side of the line. We purchased some things online while we were away, and I hardly thought twice about entering my credit card information onto those online stores, trusting that they were going to keep my financial information secure. Right? There's a lot of trusting that goes into living every day in our lives, and yet we're being taught not to trust, aren't we? We're being encouraged to be afraid. If you follow politics at all, you know that each side will tell you that you should be afraid of the other side because their success, if they get elected, if they get power, our country and your life as you know it is doomed, right? Gone. You should be afraid. Online fears, there's ads all the time for online security companies, right? Because you should be afraid because everybody's out to steal your identity and your banking information. And artificial intelligence is creating all kinds of fake things nowadays, and you shouldn't trust anyone. You should be afraid. Thinking about flying, the headlines months before, even longer than that, before we traveled, were all about Boeing hiding their safety problems on their airplanes, telling me that maybe I should be afraid before I get on one of those airplanes to fly. We're being taught to be afraid, and it's easy to choose fear in our own daily lives today, isn't it? When we can't know the future, when we're uncertain about significant areas in our lives, it's easy to assume the worst, to live with worry and anxiety. And I guess as you have a specific worry and anxiety in your own life that you could identify. What's yours? Your area that maybe keeps you awake at night. Is it work? As you wonder about how secure your job really is, maybe it won't be there for you soon. Is your anxiety around money? Some of us maybe worry at night whether there will be enough to last through the month. Others worry that there won't be enough for retirement. Maybe your worry is around your health. Maybe things just aren't feeling as good as they used to be, and you worry that there's something significant. Some of us worry that every headache is a brain tumor. It's easy to assume the worst and be filled with anxiety. Kids, I hate to tell you this, but school is just around the corner, starting up again. Are you anxious? Are you worried about that? How will the year go? Will you have good friends? Will you get good grades? Will you be able to do it? Parents, maybe you worry about your kids. Are you parenting well? How are they going to turn out? Do you dare identify in your own mind? Just think about what your worry, what your anxiety is. Psalm 62 is written in the face of that worry and anxiety. It's written to help us trust, to learn how to trust in those aspects of life when we are filled with worry. Psalm 62, like the other Psalms, is a song, and it starts with a chorus that will be repeated. The chorus means if you don't remember anything else in the song, remember this. This is the part that David, who writes the psalm, wants to get stuck in your head. Right? The chorus is what we keep singing again and again. Verses 1 and 2. It says, truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. Truly my soul finds rest in God. That word rest is literally translated silence. My soul finds silence. That's the opposite of fear that shouts at us, right? It's the opposite of doubts that continually nag at us. It's the opposite of anxiety that keeps us worried, thinking about that future that's so unsure. David says, my soul is silent, peaceful, because he has chosen to put his trust in God. He's chosen to hand all of those anxieties over to God. Right? He gives us two powerful images that show us how he has learned to trust God in his life instead of worrying. They're evidence from his own life and from his own experience. Right? He says, God is, first of all, my rock and my salvation. Well, that word rock has a very specific meaning, image from David's own life story, from his past. Remember David, if you know the story of David's life, you know that before he was king, he served King Saul in his court and in his army. And once God made it clear to Saul that his son was not going to be king after him, but that David was, then David became Saul's enemy. And Saul used all the power of his army to hunt David and to try to kill him. And David and his small group of followers, knowing that Saul was hunting him, fled into the wilderness. And they lived in caves and rocks. Those were his hiding places where Saul couldn't find him, where he was kept safe from the enemy that was trying to kill him. Those rocks were his salvation. And now he says in the very same way, when troubles come that threaten to kill him, those rocks, God is his rock, his safe place to go in these times of uncertainty. His safe place where troubles can't find him. A place where he can rest, find quiet and peace instead of worry and anxiety. Right? So it's an image from his past. I remember what it's like to find rest and peace in the middle of anxiety, in the safety of the rock. And God is my rock. And then secondly, he uses an image from his present. He says, God is my fortress. I will never be shaken. Because now circumstances have changed in David's life. He is now king instead of fugitive. Right? And he now has a city wall surrounding him to keep him safe. He has a palace that he lives in with guards at the doors. He has a whole army set to protect him. And yet, even in those changes, David says that the ultimate truth of where I find my security and safety hasn't changed. I'm still trusting God. God is still my fortress. God is still the place where I put my trust. God is where I find my security and my peace, not in the walls that are around me, not in the fortress of stone, but in the fortress that God is. Okay, I read that, and my first reaction, my human reaction is, sure, David can trust God because he's king. It's easy not to worry about money when you are rich. It's easy not to worry about your safety when you have an army protecting you. It's easy not to worry about your career when you are king. And it's easy not to worry about your kids when they are royalty. It's my first reaction. But let me tell you the story about what was going on in David's life that inspired him to write Psalm 62. This story comes from 2 Samuel 15 through 18, if you want to read it yourself today. It's a story of one of David's sons by the name of Absalom, who got sick of just being a prince, and he wanted to be a king himself. So Absalom takes the time to win the hearts of the people of Israel to his side, to subtly convince them that he should be king instead of his father David. And then he wins the loyalty of much of the army and the army's leaders, the generals, to his side, convincing them that they should serve him instead of his father David. And then he goes to a nearby city of Hebron, and he declares himself to be king, and he calls all the people, and he calls the army and the leaders of the army to his side and says, now, I am king. Now we go together to Jerusalem, and we kill my father David, and we take the throne for ourselves. And that's exactly what he plans to do. Absalom is coming to kill his father David. And David is, first of all, heartbroken. This is his son coming to kill him. And he's afraid because he knows his son has the power to do just that. And so he takes those few people who are still faithful to him, and he flees Jerusalem, humiliated. He flees knowing he might never return again, knowing he might not survive. David knows anxiety. He knows sleepless nights and worry because his life is not so secure. And that's what verses 3 and 4 go on to tell us. This is what he writes. He writes, how long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down this leaning wall, this tottering fence? Surely they intend to topple me from my lofty place. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but in their hearts they curse. All of David's confidence is now turned to doubt and fear because his whole world is falling apart. Did you catch that image in verse 3? He feels like a tottering fence. He once felt like a strong fortress, a rock wall. Now he's a tottering fence that a little breeze might just blow down. In the middle of all that uncertainty in his life, in the middle of his great fear and anxiety, comes the chorus again in verses 5 through 7. He says, yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my rock and my refuge. David says, my soul is still silent. I'm still at peace in the middle of all this turmoil. Because no matter the circumstance, David says, I'm choosing to trust God. He is still my rock. He is still my fortress. It's pretty amazing when all of life seems to be falling apart around him. He still trusts God. And David's experience of trust here then becomes an invitation for us to trust. In verse 8, David looks through time. He looks ahead thousands of years to see you and to see me. And he says, trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. Do you dare insert your own name there instead of you people? Right? So read it with your own name. Trust in him at all times, Tony. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is your refuge. Trust in him at all times. Your name, speak your name. Pour out your heart to him, for God is your refuge. He knows that God can be trusted because he has experienced God's faithfulness. And he wants you to experience that same peace and rest and calm in the middle of your anxious times. So I had to identify your anxiety and your worry earlier. Now ask yourself, in the middle of that worry and stress and trouble, where are you putting your trust? Can your soul find rest, silence, peace, because you're trusting God? Or maybe you're trusting your own wisdom, your own ability to handle it, to take care of it. But David has a word for you in verse 9. He says, surely the lowborn, the regular or common people, surely the lowborn are but a breath. The highborn, the important, the powerful people, they are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together, they're only a breath. In other words, no matter who you are, if you're trusting in your own wisdom, your own ability, your own strength, you're not going to find security or peace. Think about it. David was king, and he lost it all. He couldn't trust in his own power, his own ability. David wonders, are you trusting in your money, your financial ability, which is really the fortress of our modern time, right? We build walls of finances, but instead of bringing us rest, those walls just bring us more worry when we begin to trust them. They become, as David says, this tottering fence that's ready to blow over at any time. In verse 10, David goes on to say, do not trust in extortion or put vain hope in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. In other words, whether you stole it or earned it, all of your money, no matter how much you have, cannot give you rest. In fact, modern studies show that wealthy people are no more at peace, no more at rest than those who have no money. The more money they get, the more they worry, the more anxious they are. Every fortress that we build every fortress that we trust to protect us will fail us, will leave us anxious and afraid. Learning to trust God for the future is the only way to find rest, to find silence in our souls, to experience peace. Right? David says your money may disappear and your paychecks may end, but God's promises to love and care for you will go on forever. You might lose your job tomorrow, but your position as God's forgiven and loved child will never be lost. And all of your friends may hurt you and desert you, but your God will never let you go. That is the grand finale to this song that David gives us, starting in verse 11. Right? He says, one thing God has spoken, two things I have heard. Power belongs to you, God, and with you, Lord, is unfailing love. Those are the two things to always remember, the two things that will change how you view the future and live in the present. Remember that God is strong. You can trust his power to handle your future. He is God, which means he's stronger than the bully that is threatening you, stronger than the boss that is making life miserable for you, stronger than any president or prime minister or dictator who seem to have so much power in this world. God is stronger. He has the power to create and destroy, the power to protect you and defend you, the power to help you and to heal you, the power to rescue you and to save you from whatever is threatening you. And he has the power to carry you through and to give you strength to make it through whatever tough time you are facing. God is strong. Don't forget that. And secondly, God is unfailing in his love. He is in love with you. And he wants to use his awesome power for your good. We have a God who is strong, who can handle anything the future holds. And we have a God who is loving. He's on your side. His power is for you. So you can trust him. You can rest. You can silence the voices of worry and anxiety. That's how David ends this song. The very last line, you reward everyone according to what they have done. And our doing is trusting. Choosing to let go of our worry and to find our rest in him. It doesn't mean, our trust in God doesn't mean we don't do anything, that we live irresponsible in this life. No. We do the best we can. And then we trust that God will do his work. We believe that this is our Father's world and he's holding it in his hands, and we rest. We believe that I am his child and he's holding me in his hands. And I rest. We can't end this morning without acknowledging that trusting God does not mean that we will then be immune to any disappointments and pain in life. Right? In our story today, David trusted, and serious trouble still came. All of our lives are proof of that, right? We either have or are experiencing pain, maybe in your marriage or your employment, your finances, your family, your friendships. My guess is it wasn't hard for you at the start of our time together to think of what is making you anxious, what is worrying you. Jesus himself promised us that in this world we will have trouble. And then he immediately reminded us that he has overcome this world, that we should take heart, that trouble does not win. right? We know the end of the story now, that the empty cross and the empty tomb promise us. In the end, this whole world is made new again. It is made perfect. There will be a new heaven and a new earth, no matter what the dictators do or who gets elected. And in the end, you and I are made perfect by Jesus. We get to spend eternity with him, where there is no more pain or tears or sorrow or death. In the meantime, we hold on to that promise. We trust that that's what's coming. But in the meantime, in the middle of a life that does have pain and tears and sorrow, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, peace in your trouble, silence in your worry. Trust me." So when you find yourself anxious and afraid, maybe after you read the headlines in the morning, when you head to work or school where difficulties wait, when there's pain or disappointment that's out of your control, remember the treasure that God gives in Psalm 62. Pull out the psalm and read it again. My soul finds rest in God alone. And remember, God is strong, and he is absolutely in love with you. He is faithful still, and always will be. Which is exactly the song that if you were with us on Sunday, we would now sing. Faithful Still by King's Porch. It would be good for you as you end now to go to YouTube, look up Faithful Still by King's Porch. Listen to it and make this your prayer as you end our time together.